Joining us now is writer and political commentator Adam Schwarz. Adam, these numbers are really just startling. What do you think has fueled such a sharp rise in anti-Semitic attitudes across the UK, particularly since October 7th?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, these figures will be deeply worrying and disturbing to the UK Jewish population, which for a very long time has enjoyed high levels of tolerance in British society. And I think the kind of overwhelming driver of the increase has been the way that social media has sort of provided a platform for the war in Gaza to be projected to the British public. I would say, that combined with a general misunderstanding across the British public of the kind of relationship that British Jews have with the state of Israel, which I think, the survey results really show is largely kind of focused on the issue of Zionism, which I think is often misinterpreted or misrepresented for sort of unconditional support for the actions of the Israeli government. Of course, in this context, in terms of support for the IDF's actions in Gaza, rather than a sort of general belief in the state's right to exist, which I think a lot of British Jews kind of identify with. And I think this has really resulted in the kind of war in Gaza becoming a mass radicalization event over the past couple of years. We've seen a colossal amount of very graphic social media information and pictures and videos come out of the war over the last couple of years. And I think, social media is increasingly optimized to kind of reward that kind of polarizing content, which, often I think contains a lot of mis and disinformation. And, just from a personal perspective, just before coming on air, I was looking at how much anti-Semitism I've received online. I've got about 250 anti-Semitic messages over the last month alone. When I have complained to X about death threats, they've told me it doesn't violate their policies. When that's been followed up by the British Metropolitan Police, X has refused to hand over that information. So I think really in answer to your question, I think online spaces and social media in particular have really fueled this rise. And clearly there's kind of willingness to provide extremists with a safe space.
This survey shows that young people are the ones who are expressing some of the most radical views. What does that say to you about the narratives that are shaping public opinion amongst the next generation, what that means for the future of the UK?
Well, I think that's really the area that's particularly concerning because, of course, the youth are the people who will ultimately take responsibility for the most senior roles in public life in the UK. And I think really this kind of is a ticking time bomb ultimately for British society when we see these deeply worrying views about Jews and sort of misunderstandings about Jewish views towards the Israeli government that's most prevalent for young people in the UK. And I think sort of from a personal perspective, I've kind of have witnessed that anti-Semitism seems to be manifesting in sort of a exclusory way in the UK, where often young people are kind of excluding people on the basis of views towards Israel in which they weren't done before. You see a lot of social media profiles and even dating profile apps that say no Zios. And so people are sort of looking for these political purity tests that kind of indirectly affect overwhelmingly Jews. So I think that's particularly worrying. And I think, as I was mentioning, it's no coincidence the fact that I mentioned, that social media is really the main driver of this, when actually we see in the YouGov survey results that actually young people are overwhelmingly impacted by this. I think this is something that needs to be addressed, both as a society, but also by Jews in the UK in general.